Hello, my name is Sean O'Neill. I am the graduate student helping with this year's undergraduate water management fellowship. And this is the presentation for the pilot program of 2020 into 2021. Each team member will introduce themselves, but this was the team for this first pilot year of the fellowship program. It was a culmination of water management, sustainabilities, and public health came together. So with these individuals come together, what ended up coming from this first year of the fellowship program was TreeSim, which is an interactive model that allows a user to determine how many trees they want to plant, where those trees are going to be planted, and then be able to determine the profitability of those trees, and public health savings, how environmental justice plays into where trees are planted, and then how water resources will be used to plant, maintain, and water these trees, given the changing climate that Albuquerque will be facing. So that kind of just outlines our objectives a little bit more. So we were interested in using and evaluating stormwater production, and if stormwater would produce enough water annually or within a monsoon season to be able to plant however many trees we could plant in Albuquerque, and or to maintain the urban canopy that already exists. The second objective was to look at this and make sure that we're planting areas in an environmentally justice way, so an equitable distribution of these trees. And then the third was to look at the healthcare costs. So trees are great for many reasons. They provide multiple health benefits. They provide greater shade area. There's a whole host of studies that trees can provide a host of market and non-market value. And so we use public health data to really look at the cost savings of doing nothing, planting no trees, or trying to plant trees, and what that will do for Albuquerque's future for the next 100 years. So in the West, where water resources can be kind of tight, we wanted to evaluate stormwater. So currently the average runoff from Albuquerque's stormwater on the east side of Albuquerque is around 2,800 CFS in a monsoon season, and 6,500 CFS in an annual year. So this is a water resource that's currently not being utilized. It runs off Albuquerque, it goes into the North Verdun Channel, and then it gets distributed and diverted directly into the Rio Grande. So we were interested, okay, once if we wanted to capture some of the stormwater, which would require an infrastructure change to the city of Albuquerque, but for future planning, this could be a possibility of utilizing stormwater as a secondary use. And in this case, how much water would it take to sustain all of the current trees and future trees that we would want to plant within Albuquerque? So we kind of looked at the model in multiple different ways. One is stormwater not being utilized. Albuquerque is predicted to become hotter. We're already seeing things like the urban asphalt island effect, where hotter days, Albuquerque is hotter than the surrounding area. And we want to figure out how we can reduce and mitigate this. And a good way of reducing and mitigating this is planting a greater urban canopy and providing the public of Albuquerque with more green space.
Hi, I'm Sophia. I'm going into my senior year at UNM with an environmental science major, sustainability studies minor. So my part of this was kind of looking at census data and tree canopy provided on iTree, and I found that Albuquerque tree cover was consistent with the rest of the country. Lack of tree cover was directly correlated to social inequities like income level and race. So we decided we wanted to plant trees in communities that would benefit from them most, and chose these areas here based on lack of existing tree canopy, high amount of plantable space, and the percent of population below the poverty line. So the highlighted areas are the areas we chose for the model. As you can see on the top map, there's relatively lower tree canopy, and there's also a high amount of plantable space, as shown in the bottom graph. We used iTree Landscape to decide where we wanted to prioritize tree planting, and the data for air pollution removal and population data that we used in the model was also gathered from iTree Landscape. And then using iTree Design, we found energy cost savings based on modeled tree growth within these chosen areas over 100 years, which is how we calculated energy savings per square foot of shade for each tree species.
Hi, so my name is Yoko. I am the public health student in this project, and I'll be talking about how tree canopy affects the urban island heat effect. So to integrate the public health aspect into our interactive model, we looked at how tree canopy affected the urban island heat effect. Depending on future level of emissions and other factors, annual average U.S. temperatures alone are projected to increase by 1 degree Celsius to 6 degrees Celsius by the end of this century. And heat waves are the deadliest of extreme weather-related events in the United States, causing more deaths annually than any other natural disaster, including hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods and earthquakes combined. So our model looks specifically to the Albuquerque area, and we increase tree canopy in spaces that have historically lacked green spaces, particularly in the South Valley and areas in the International District. Here, urban green space could help combat many urban ills and improve life for city dwellers, especially for their health. And urban tree cover is important in several ways, including removal of pollutants from the air, soil, and water. It also releases water vapor into the atmosphere, which cools the surrounding areas, which mitigates the urban heat island effect. It also decreases the usage of air conditioning, provided there is more shade due to increased tree canopy. Urban green access is often highly stratified based on income, ethno-racial characteristics, age, gender, and disability, and other axes. So it's important that we focus on catering to certain subpopulations. High ambient temperatures, extreme heat events, EHEs, or heat waves are rising because of global temperatures from climate change, and they have a dire impact on health outcomes. The impact of heat-related illnesses due to extreme heat events, especially here in Albuquerque, create higher increases emergency department visit rates or costs in the United States. The state has experienced an average annual maximum temperature increase of 3.3 degrees Fahrenheit since the 1970s, making it the second fastest warming state in the nation. So in our model, we calculated cost savings on health outcomes by the reduction of ER visits in the future as a response to extreme climate change events. We calculated these outcomes with the average hot days per year and used the New Mexico IBIS data and to project future ER visits that are related to heat-related illnesses, primarily in heat strokes. Between 1979 and 2011, New Mexico has experienced, on average, 93 days annually when the daily maximum temperature has exceeded 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And we predict that this number of hot days will increase at a rate of 1 additional day per year or more, depending on the climate change impacts of the future. So because of these, experts do see more health problems to be caused by heat and what we call HRIs, which are heat-related illnesses, which are groups of preventable health conditions ranging from mild forms like heat cramps to potentially lethal things like heat strokes. So this once again stresses the importance of increasing green spaces in areas that have historically been subject to low health outcomes due to socioeconomic factors.
So we chose 6 tree species: the western soapberry, the Chinese pistache, desert willow, the accolade elm, the bur oak, and the chinkapin oak. And these are all common in the Albuquerque area, and they were listed on the Albuquerque Bernalillo County Water Utility Authority website. There was 100 plus tree and plant species that qualified for a rebate, giving financial incentive for citizens to plant trees. So we chose some native trees like the desert willow and non-native trees like the bur oak so we could provide a diverse canopy. They range in size and water use. We wanted to choose trees that would provide the most shade possible and still be drought tolerant. So in the simulation, we were able to quantify tree benefits by square footage of canopy, which was different for every species. And several other factors also influenced the gain, which we'll talk about in the next few slides.
So the tree benefits, we've used present known information to make decisions for these trees' future use and its benefits. So our model actually measures the amount of area covered by tree canopy with data generated from iTree. And it's especially important because it indicates how many urban trees there are right now in those areas and how much shade those trees are providing. So with this information, we're able to forecast the revenue of each tree with how much they'll generate of energy savings and health cost savings. Like I said, urban tree cover is important in several ways, which include removing pollutants from the air, soil, and water, release of water vapor into the atmosphere, which cools surrounding areas, mitigating the urban island heat effect. It also benefits wildlife carbon storage and sequestration, and also has physical and mental health benefits.
Hi, I'm Atlin, and I'm a civil engineering student going into my senior year. So I'm going to go over the actual structure of our model and how we got the game to operate. So we had a few objectives. First was to determine the stormwater supply for watering the trees. Next would be to evaluate the economic value of an individual tree, both market and non-market values. We were to compare values of the 6 tree species we selected and their water uses. And then we were to determine the optimum tree composition for both maximizing profit and maximizing water use. So the model accomplishes these objectives through the use of 3 primary components, the first being the tree benefits container, the individual species benefits containers, and a final consolidation of benefits across all 6 species. So the tree benefits were broken down into 3 main categories: air quality improvements, public health benefits, and energy savings. Energy savings by far produced the highest yields and reduced cooling costs and increased thermal efficiency in the buildings surrounding the trees. And each of these benefits was calculated per square foot of canopy space provided by any given tree, and this is how we determine the value that each species would have. So this value that each species has, determined in each individual tree species container, was multiplied by the number of the trees of each species input by the user during the gameplay, starting at a lesser prorated value and then growing in value until the tree finally reaches maturity. This container is also where water use for each tree was determined, factoring in additional watering needs for the first few years of a tree's life and then plateauing for the remainder of its life. So the gameplay tab gives you 2 primary inputs. First is the number of trees of each species, and second is the climate change severity scenario. So any combination of trees can be planted up until the total plantable space is filled, which is shown on that graph. The space does not have to be filled in its entirety, but this is just a maximum theoretical limit based on the iTree data for the 2 areas which we selected. So once you have the data inputted that you would like, you click the Run Model, and it chooses and calculates the results for the chosen inputs. The Results tab provides the end result of the game. It shows the time taken to turn a profit based upon the scenario chosen, the total profit made after 100 years with a breakdown of the composition of the benefits, and finally the annual water use of the planted trees. The red lines show the results from the user's input, and the blue lines show the maximum profit and minimum water use, respectively, from a computer-optimized planting scenario. A good goal of the user could be to get as close to these optimized curves as possible, although it should be noted that the optimum profit and the optimum water use were derived from 2 different planting scenarios. With all of this information, you're ready to play the game.